So listen, we are on our third and final panel, and it's going to be all about technology-based entrepreneurship and creation of new ideas. Now, we just listened to the previous session, which was very much oriented around big tech and innovation there. And, you know, some of the comments, and we'll talk about at the very, very end about the data flywheel. An interesting point is all of the companies we think of today that are large tech, Google and Meta, et cetera, all started as startup ventures with an idea that had to be grown. And that's the area we really want to focus on today is where are the areas of innovation in entrepreneurship? What does it take to grow a lot of those businesses? By the way, this area of focus on tech-based entrepreneurship is one of the biggest areas of focus we have at the Easton Center today. So we're doing a lot of work now with the Samueli School of Engineering, the Geffen School of Medicine, the Innovation Challenge that many of you have heard about, and also obviously working here at Anderson with the Price Center and the Venture Accelerator, all to think more and more about, are we creating the right type of technology-based entrepreneurship? So I'm going to give you just a little bit of context to set things up on venture investing and technology-based entrepreneurship. 2021 was a record year in raising capital, in new ventures, et cetera. 2022, tale of two halves. Beginning of the year was incredible pace, and then a notable softening that happened at the very end of last year, third quarter, fourth quarter, et cetera. That trend existed in the US and actually was a bit worse globally in terms of slowdown. If you look at what sectors were softening, a lot of them were in business and financial services. They were in a lot of the kind of general areas of information tech. However, areas of clean tech are examples where there's still been huge growth. So electric vehicle makers, charging station ventures, et cetera, of all types. One of the interesting areas that we're still waiting to see what is going to happen is in cryptocurrency. So cryptocurrency's gotten huge amount of funding, but obviously with the latest developments with FTX, to be determined what plays out there. So we are very fortunate to have two great speakers with us today. First of all, Barry Eggers. Barry Eggers is the founding partner of Lightspeed Ventures. Lightspeed Ventures is one of the world's largest early stage investors. He's got 26 years of venture investing experience. He's got 10 years of operating experience. He sits on the boards of Dremio, Parsable, Serverless, and Cohere. He's had a bunch of home run investments, and if he has a chance, it'd be interesting to hear his investment in Snapchat and how insightful his daughter was about Snapchat and where that was going to go. Other big investments, Nimble Storage, Avi Network, Sirocco Systems. Barry worked at Cisco early on, helped develop a lot of their early distribution channels and also their whole M&A process. He's been the chairman of the National Venture Capital Association. Currently serves on Venture Forward. Venture Forward is an organization that's focused on driving diversity and inclusion in venture capital. He's been named multiple times the Forbes Midas list of top venture capital investors. He has a BA in economics from UCLA, go Bruins, and you don't have to worry, he has an MBA from Harvard, he doesn't. He didn't get into Harvard, so he went to Stanford. So we'll take.
I did get into Harvard.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
I went to Stanford.
Okay. So I'll have to come up with a new line next. So secondly, let me introduce Ivonne Wassenaar. She's a seasoned C-level CIO serial Chief Executive Officer. She's been involved in a lot of transformations, technology-based transformations. She was at Accenture early on, led a lot of their effort to scale in the tech and communications area, worked with companies like NetApp and BEA as they move from product orientation to solution selling. She's worked with VMware on a variety of their acquisitions, and then she's been involved as an advisor to a variety variety of early stage tech companies that have had great outcomes. She's an early advisor now to Sneak. She's on the board at JFrog, advisor to Blue Sky. She's spoken at a variety of events, including the World Economic Forum. She talked about the transformational opportunity and societal implications of using drones and AI in how the world works. She's been the CEO of Airware, CIO of New Relic, held multiple leadership roles at VMware and Accenture. Current board seats, Forrester Research, Ariston Networks, JFrog, Rubrik, and Harvey Mudd College. Been on a variety of boards in the past, including MuleSoft, which was acquired by Salesforce. She's gotten a whole bunch of awards, Women of Influence in Silicon Valley, Board List Top 20, San Francisco Business Times Public Company CIO Award winner, and Wall Street Journal Woman of Note. Most importantly, she's a double Bruin. So she's got a bachelor's, yay! Bachelor's in economics and computer science from UCLA, MBA in strategy and operations from UCLA Anderson, and even more importantly, she's our latest addition to our Easton Center board. So welcome to both of you.
Hold on. And she got into Harvard too.
Everybody's at the theme. Everybody's getting into Harvard.
Let me be clear.
Okay.
I was smart enough not even to apply because the return on investment that I made here was much better.
Oh, I love it. Well said. Well said. I love it. Okay, so as a quick reminder, I'll ask a bunch of questions and then we'll go to Slido. Slido code Innovate3. All of you are very smart. You would have figured all that out. We went 1, 2, and now we're 3. Innovate3. Enter in your questions. You can either upvote or put in your own question. I'll try and ask the most popular questions. Now, both of you have got a deep background. Sorry.
We have one question from ChatGPT.
Okay.
Rated, and someone will just generate a question for us.
Yes, well, somebody will just generate for us. We won't have to worry about it. Both of you have got a deep background in enterprise tech. We've spent a lot of the morning kind of talking more about consumer tech. But can you, each of you tell us what areas of enterprise tech you're most excited about right now? Ivonne?
So I really appreciate the question. And as all good panelists, I'm not going to answer it directly.
Okay.
Gary's going to have a really interesting answer.
Yeah.
And I don't want to duplicate. What I thought I would maybe touch on a little bit, when one assesses what is hot tech, you can't really answer the question without time frame. And so Terry mentioned I went to the World Economic Forum many years ago, and I was running a really cool company called Airware. We did drone analytics, so we used drones to fly over mining sites, construction sites, 2-story steeps after a hailstorm, to create orthomosaics up in the cloud and use machine learning and AI, to do everything from manage the slope of a road on a mining site to improve fuel efficiency, to measure the height of safety walls. People used to drive around in trucks with a stick sticking out the back to see if the high walls were high enough to meet standards. What would take you days, you could do in split seconds, measure stockpiles, all these great things. Well, this all sounds phenomenal. In fact, it's why I joined the company. This was many years ago. The company had already been around 10 years. I took over from the founder, and I'm here to tell you, we made $0. That's a really good investment. I was CEO for 14 months, but why? That technology sounds phenomenal. It's actually still around today. We had raised over $100 million. A lot of venture money went into this, a lot of time and effort. There's 3 reasons why we didn't make money. One was technology can sound really cool. It can be really interesting, but it has to work at the level of accuracy required for the use case. And in our particular case, if you were measuring a stockpile, you needed to be able to create a digital twin once is easy. To create it precisely from the same measurement point twice is a lot harder. And we didn't have the GPS technology on the drones at that point in time. We do now, but at that point in time to be able to get completely accurate measurement. The second thing is policy. And so if you're emerging in new technologies, you have to think about policy. Well, the obvious policy was flying drones. You couldn't fly beyond visual line of sight. So all your ideas of flying drones to inspect electricity lines, Can't do it because you'd have to have a person in a truck driving, watching the drone fly. Kind of ruins your ROI. But the other thing that we found is we did inspection of 2-story steeps. And you would use the orthomosaic or the digital twin to measure if the hail damage was large enough that the insurers would have to pay to fix the roof. What we found is the courts wouldn't accept the imagery as evidence. And because it needed to be fair, and you couldn't have some people climbing up ladders, risking their lives, and using that evidence in the same, policy decisions as somebody who flew a drone. And so there were all these unknowns in terms of policies that were really important. And probably the biggest differential in adoption is culture. And so we found, for example, with the measurement of stockpiles, if our technology created a different result than the people who manually measured it, everybody assumed the people who manually measured it were right. And it takes a long time to change behavior. And I think that's even what you saw with Zoom. The reason that Zoom and video conferencing became popular and hybrid work and remote work became popular so much faster than it otherwise would have, we didn't have a choice. We got thrown into it. But if you talk to 99% of CEOs before the pandemic, they would have told you remote work would never work. And so you can't underestimate the impact of culture. So when I think about the hot technologies today, my list is probably a little bit ho-hum to many of you because it's not the metaverse. It's not, Web3. It's not these things. Like I'm looking for, on this learning curve, not the stuff way out here that has the potential to be amazing in 10 years, but what's the stuff right here now? What's the stuff we've been cultivating? So things like autonomous trucks, I think, are amazing. I actually think not the metaverse, but to have, to have augmented reality. So why do we need to go in a whole different world? Why can't we use the technology? So companies like Magic Leap, who started off as a consumer company, have pivoted into augmented reality for business use cases where there's now enough technology capabilities relative to the cost to deliver a meaningful return on investment.
Excellent, excellent. Barry, what about you?
I agree with her.
No other thoughts?
See, that's because I went to UCLA, he went to Stanford.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, we just messed around. Enterprise technologies, everyone's waiting for the next great set of technologies and markets, but the existing markets are pretty darn good. Enterprises are still buying a lot of security products, and they will continue to. They're buying a lot of data analytics products, and they'll continue to, even through a recession. There's a lot of markets like that are really recession-proof for enterprises. They just got to do that. But also, what we learned through COVID was there's some new issues that enterprises are facing. How do they manage a decentralized workforce and distributed workforce or virtual workforce, right? How do they manage a workforce that is increasingly a millennial workforce that has different demands than us boomers had? And so there's more HR capabilities and hiring capabilities and retention capabilities. There's supply chain technologies that have gone from supply chain 1.0 and 2.0 to now really, new generation supply chain. How do you manage your supply chain when you have so much uncertainty of a macro shock? Those things are all stuff that enterprises are now starting to think about more and prioritize versus the last couple of years. They're also trying to look for tools where they can, I wouldn't say generative AI tools, but I would say tools that not only automate, but also make it so a regular person like me can code or create something that I wouldn't be able to create. And so it's those kind of things that are becoming very popular and getting a lot of steam in enterprises.
So is it fair to say, based on what both of you have said, is maybe today, in what is a softer environment, many of the enterprise areas actually may be more appealing, partly because they're working on cost improvement. You have, to Yvonne's point, an ability kind of leaders to say, this is where I want my team to go execute, et cetera. Is that fair to say, or that's too much of a generalization?
You mean enterprise is more
versus
interesting than consumer?
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of consumers out there, and they're spending money. And I think enterprises are a little easier to find sometimes in terms of who to go to with your products. On consumers, sometimes it can be a little hit or miss. and it's hard to tell what's going to be popular, but a lot of consumer technologies out there. It's just not the ones we traditionally think of. I mean, social media, yeah, it's great, cool. But are we going to see another great social media company come along? We will, but it'll take some time, and there's not many of them.
Yep.
But there's a lot of other stuff. There's a lot of e-commerce capabilities, and just a lot of things that consumers are buying. Financial fintech opportunities for consumers, and half the world is not banked. How do we bank that? How do we create currencies that people can trade globally without banks involved? And so all that kind of stuff is pretty interesting, and we do both consumer and enterprise, and of course we also do healthcare. So that's a third piece.
Yep. And healthcare, just on that topic, growing area and lots of investments, or tough right now?
Growing area, because people like you and me are getting old.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
No, healthcare
And it needs disruption.
The technology is coming to healthcare, and we've also learned that through COVID we could actually deliver healthcare remotely.
Yep.
Well, and so you're seeing a lot of those kind of technologies, and they're adding in AI to make it more effective. And I think the next 10 years are going to be really exciting for healthcare.
Yep. Excellent.
Yeah. And I would add on to it. I mean, I think to Barry's comment, there's a lot going on in consumer and enterprise. They're very, very different markets typically to go after. They have different skill sets. They have different profiles. And so my expertise is definitely much more on the enterprise side. But I would absolutely say when you look at what are some of the breakthrough innovations that you can make with consumers, some of it gets down to the blocking and tackling of how can you help people increase the financial return on the limited savings they might have. I was talking to a woman CEO down in Australia, and she's built a great business where people just deposit their paychecks with this company. They've got a set amount of objectives that they want to achieve. They do instant payments. They do portfolio balancing and management on really, really relatively small incomes. These aren't big income earners, but if you have a little extra, there's different ways in terms of getting your prescriptions now and managing your healthcare costs. There's always stuff that's going on in design and fashion, but when you think about the basic human needs of healthcare, of housing, there's 3D printing of housing. And so there's some really, really impressive and important, I think, disruptive changes that if you look in developing countries, there's a lot around, safe water and things like that that are infrastructure investments on how we create a better world.
Yep. Good. Let me ask you to deep dive now on artificial intelligence, ChatGPT, which we've talked about a lot in the previous 2 sessions. Barry, I remember when you spoke in my class a year or 2 ago, you said, anybody that's pitching you on Sand Hill Road in Menlo Park better have something to do with remote. Remote was kind of everything. Is AI, ChatGPT, et cetera, is that the new mantra, or do you have a different view on it?
Yeah, sometimes we get a little bit wrapped up. There was the e-commerce for everything, and there was, ChatGPT for hamburgers. At some point we've got to figure out what the use cases are and got to make the technology more useful. And that will happen, and there's probably a whole thesis of investments that'll spur up around generative AI. We're making some of those. It's early though, right?
Yeah.
This is a 10-year thing before it really becomes, I think, mainstream, and that we've took that long for e-commerce. Took the internet 20 years really to become what it can be, and it's still evolving. So, and then the question about the data obviously is really important. OpenAI is opening up the technology. Maybe there's a way for us not to just compete with data, but open it up so we democratize and actually unleash the power to you and me. But I think that'll take a while before that happens.
Yvonne, let me ask you to add on. I'm going to give you an additional data point here to add on to that answer. So Malik Ducard, who was our first speaker from Pinterest, Chief Content Officer, said ChatGPT is one of the few areas of technology-based innovation where reality is greater than the hype. Meaning this thing is going to be bigger, grander, quicker, et cetera, compared to so many other areas of tech that are just kind of hyped. Your view, again, on AI, ChatGPT, especially in the enterprise?
Yeah, so I'm going to take a step back. What is AI? So back in the day when I was running Airware, which is now 7 years ago, I was talking about, we had, AI-driven capabilities because we were using machine learning models to microsegment these sites and do compares and taking humans out of the loop. And Buddy, who was the CTO and a PhD from MIT, was like, Ivonne, you cannot say AI. This is not AI. This is large-scale computational analysis in the cloud. And I'm like, okay, no PR person is going to write that. I just want to say AI. That was much more succinct. And the reason I bring this up is when you look at transformational capabilities, there's a whole spectrum. It starts with what Barry said, data. Are you collecting data? And it's so much easier and cheaper, and there's so many more sources of data that you have to start by collecting it and have access to it. Then are you using the information from that data to inform what you're doing? Then are you creating machine learning models and computational analysis to actually further your cause? And so there's a lot of things you can do before AI that can bring tremendous value. So for example, when I was at New Relic, which is an observability company, we collected tons of data, but we weren't doing anything with it. And all of a sudden what happened is the users of our technology were overwhelmed with all this stuff to look at. So what we started to do was use our understanding of the data to highlight to them what might be the most important things to focus on first. And then if you look at a company like PagerDuty, they look at outages and issues in technology, and they all do that all in the cloud. And so they can look at these things across multiple companies. And so they can help much more quickly identify when issues are. Barry brought up cybersecurity. If you have information, not just of one company, but of multiple institutions and organizations, you can capture bad actors much more quickly. You can detect anomalous behavior. None of that is AI. But it's incredibly powerful, and there's a lot of money. So I think AI is the new E. And so a lot of people use it without knowing what it is. I think things like ChatGPT are very interesting and entertaining. I've used it to ask numerous questions, of which I'd give it about a boring 70% accuracy rate.
Yeah.
Boring because it's just not that entertaining to read, and 70% because at best, that's what it's getting on questions that aren't that hard, but it looks good and it's exciting. What I think is super impressive is if you take that capability and you apply it to a use case. So there's a startup that is using large language models, and they're building specific use cases for customer success organizations. And they sell that to other entities, but they'll do advanced training on your specific data set to really curate something that is much more highly valuable than just the generic models.
Yeah.
But there's incremental work to be done. So ChatGPT itself is interesting and entertaining. I think the real value is going to be when we get specific use cases, we increase the accuracy, and we don't rush to take the humans out of the loop, but rather we use humans to really enhance and provide that perfect customer experience, whether it's for a business or a consumer.
Great. So on this topic about collecting data, how important data is, Dinkar Jain, who just spoke in the previous session from Meta, talked about the data flywheel, and basically large tech companies having more and more access to data, creating unique opportunities. Now we had Sai, who's from Google, who had a little more of an entrepreneurial flavor. Do you worry about large tech companies getting disproportionate market share in technology and data-based innovation because of their growing scale? Google, Meta, Amazon, et cetera. And if the answer is even partially yes, then what area of entrepreneurship is the safest or the best area to focus in?
So I've worked in tech for 30 years, and the first 20 in big companies, you have little to fear. There's a lot that they can do, and there's a lot of fundamental work, and there's a lot of investment they can make, and obviously they can become very powerful, but not to the extent that it wipes out the ability of entrepreneurship, in the sense that large companies get so big, it's really hard to be agile. It's really hard to think outside the system and disrupt yourself. It's really hard to be able to do all the pivots around pricing or packaging or messaging that would be required to really find that sweet product market fit. That if you have no customers and you're just starting greenfield and you're not sitting there with a big arrow in your back for all the bad actors that you can do. And so I think, there do need to be some checks and balances in the system. But like I said, I believe like the real power for a lot of the AI capabilities, the big companies are going to dominate in having the mass foundation. But I think you can do a lot of innovation off the top, particularly since some of this is open source and more accessible to everybody.
Excellent.
Barry, what do you
Barry?
Shoot, we used to sit here and talk about, can anyone else beat IBM? All right.
Yeah.
Is IBM still around anymore?
they had pretty good earnings.
I don't worry about the big companies. They're great places for people to learn technologies that you can recruit them to startups. So they typically, big companies tend to move slower. And they also are focused on very, very large markets. Startups are focused on markets that start small and grow to be large. So typically you don't see a lot of overlap between big companies and startups. They do serve a purpose. They take technologies and they help, make them more mature. And they teach a lot of people about that kind of stuff, but never really worried about them and from a competitive perspective. In fact, a lot of good startup entrepreneurs come from those companies, right?
So symbiotic. Let me ask you, Barry, you said you invested in healthcare. We had a Tech and Society conference in November. We had Neil Lindsay speak, who's now the new head of Amazon Health Services. His background is heading Prime, no domain expertise in healthcare. He had to be fairly careful about what he said they were going to do, but the implication is they're going to use a platform-based play, just like they do in their regular e-commerce business, to match healthcare providers and patients, and basically eliminate all the arbitrage opportunities. The fact that pricing is uneven from place to place, the fact that physicians and imaging facilities are not available for 2 months in one place and another, just basically all the great stuff we see in e-commerce is what he implied they're going to do in healthcare. Do you worry about a large tech company kind of over the top completely transforming healthcare, and you've been investing, I'm obviously taking this further, but you've been investing in a model that's optimizing the old model, and they're coming with a whole new model.
I think it's a great idea, but a startup should do it. So I think Amazon will screw it up.
Yeah.
I just don't. I think they'll just take their eye off the ball. But there are startups doing this, creating platforms for people that sort of match capabilities, services, doctors with patients and needs.
Yep.
There are platforms doing that. And so, and I think they're going to be very focused on it. So I will bet on the startup over Amazon.
Okay.
Now, cloud computing, I'll bet on Amazon at scale.
Yes.
But again, and we'll see what happens. Let's look in 3 years, see who wins that one.
Excellent. Let me ask you a couple other domain areas before we kind of talk more about, how do you do a startup and what people should go into it and all that stuff. Geographically, investment opportunities, especially in technology-based innovation in China, in India, in Latin America, all the places outside the US. Where do you rate them in this current kind of high inflation, slower economic growth environment? Do you rate them worse or actually better than the US?
Innovation?
Yeah, in areas of investment opportunity.
Well, innovation in China is probably faster than the U.S., and that's a concern for the U.S. In Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
We're seeing a lot of great investing in China. Now, there's a crackdown on how much money can go there now.
Yeah.
India, phenomenal innovation happening there, too, in great markets. It's a little earlier than China, but a lot of core technologies now there, and a lot of second and third time entrepreneurs. Europe, same thing, a little slower, but coming along. And then Israel, of course, is the king, right? Because they did it right and they built a startup nation. And the amount of capital that comes into Israel per person is way higher than any other country in the world, venture capital.
Yeah.
And then Latin America, we're starting to see. Now, that's what gets to the question of regulatory and stuff like that. Some of these neobanks and stuff like that. But there's a lot of innovation happening everywhere. In the U.S., there's a lot of innovation too. We'd like to see a little more, the government supporting it a little bit more.
And it's caused some other countries to eclipse the U.S. Is it fair to say China's eclipsing the U.S. on 5G and mobile payments? And
in 2000, 85% of venture capital went to companies in the U.S. Now 49% goes to companies in the
wow. Okay.
So, and of all the unicorns, you've heard the term unicorn, right? Billion-dollar companies, less than half are in the U.S. now.
It's amazing.
So venture capital, entrepreneurship is a global phenomenon. It's not a bad thing.
Yeah.
But we got some catching up to do, right? Because we're competing for great entrepreneurs to come to the U.S. and start their businesses. And we don't make it very easy for them.
Yeah.
We don't even give them visas.
Yep.
Right. So there's a lot of stuff we could do to really promote that.
Yep. Excellent. Yvonne, your view about the rest of the world versus here?
I mean, I would echo a lot of what Barry would say. I have a brother-in-law who lives in China, who has for almost 20 years now. And I would say China is a challenged market from an innovation standpoint just because you don't know how long it's yours. And so, until, Jack Ma and that whole thing, innovation was on wildfire. It's definitely transitioned a bit, and there are entrepreneurs who are looking to go to Singapore or elsewhere because they're concerned about just what does the future hold because it's so unknown. India, on the other hand, is really stepping up. Historically, India didn't have the infrastructure to really support innovation, and I would say many people have thought about India as a low-cost location. They are a center of excellence. There are so many highly educated, highly entrepreneurial folks who live there. When I talk to my friends who are over there, people investing there, I think India really, they are coming from behind, but I think we'll see some great progress. Another place that Barry didn't mention is Africa. There's a big effort in investing in Africa and having Africans invest in Africa, not having the white nations come in and develop the technologies, but actually developing from within. And I'm an investor in a couple of startups over there. And the way they think is very different. And it's because, again, the infrastructure is different. The needs of the consumers are different. So I invest in one company that is helping deliver medicine safely from the pharmaceutical companies directly to the doctors, because there's a lot of issues and challenges with third markets and bad drugs and stuff. So I think there's incredible innovation that's going on around. And in fact, to me, what I'm excited about is to really innovate well. It's what Barry said. You have to have repeat founders. You have to learn that failing is success. If you learn from your mistakes, you have to have people who make money who can then invest in their local communities and entrepreneurs. And we're starting to see some more of that generational investment happening outside the U.S., which I think is really strong.
Good. Let me ask each of you a question from a different angle. Actually ties into one of the questions on Slido. So Barry, let me start with you. When you look at ventures to invest in, what are the top 2 or 3 things you look for to make an affirmative decision? Yvonne, I'm going to ask you the same question on joining boards. What do you look for on boards? Barry?
People. Want to back people like Yvonne that are proven. And
Yes.
No, seriously, people is... We have 400 companies in our portfolio. The best ones have the best people, and it's not by accident. And then I think we're looking at markets and can these markets get big? We like markets that start small because the Googles and Metas and Amazons aren't there yet. So we can get a position as the leader, right? And then we want those markets to be able to grow to be very big. And so assessing the capability of a market to grow like that is actually an art. It's hard to do, but when you find it and you get to being a leader, the number one player, it's awesome.
Yeah.
Right? People also want to think about product a lot, but in my experience, the product evolves so much that assessing the initial product for a startup is a little bit fool's gold, because if you have really good people and the market's great, the product really does evolve a lot.
Yep. Good people will figure things out.
Whatever you want to call it. I hate the word pivot because that's a negative connotation, but it evolves.
Yep. Excellent. Yvonne?
Yeah. Super long story, very, very short. My fiance passed away of cancer 18 years ago. And I bring this up because when we were home with the help of hospice, he woke up in the middle of the night one night and he was really upset that he hadn't lived his life to the fullest. He was an artist and he kind of pursued a more monetary driven path in his career than his true passion. And I was 36 at the time. And I bring that up because I was a workaholic at Accenture. I was making lots of money. I was on a path to partner. I was all these great things. But I realized it was all money. I mean, not that it wasn't good work. I wasn't learning good skills. But it deeply transformed how I thought about where I spent time and what I did. And I have 3 things that I look at with anything I do, including the work here. First and foremost, is it a problem that I care about that I think is going to make the world a better place? And, it's part of why I've done a lot in infrastructure and cyber, because I think there's a lot of needs in the world around us as we digitize that people aren't focused on. And they need smart people to focus on them and make them better so that we're all safe. But very recently, I was talking to CEO of an HR company, a startup out of the UK. And I thought, we don't need another HR system. But he actually convinced me in his story. He started the company because he actually originally his parents came from Russia. Developing companies need more help getting the right people into the right jobs, evolving their skill set. It's not just your resume. It's how you evolve. And they're using AI, which they actually are, on how do you improve people's possibilities of great outcomes in their work and their joy. And so to me, the very first thing is it a problem that actually makes the world a better place? The second thing is, and it gets a little bit to the people comment, but is there shared cultural values? Particularly in startups, that's where you set the foundation of how a company is going to grow and shape, and the culture becomes the company versus any one person. And do I have shared alignment in terms of how they operate, what they do, what they value, not in just words on a wall, but in what they actually do, who they reward, who they let go, who they bring in. And then the final thing is, can I add value and will I learn? And so I'm looking for that win-win of I have experiences I can bring, but I believe the day you stop learning is the day you start dying. And so you want to go somewhere that you're stretched and you can learn from others and just thrive.
Well said. Well said. Thank you for your personal story, too. Let me ask a last question, and I'm going to go to the audience questions. Paths for people to go into entrepreneurship, especially for students here. As an example, both of you started at larger companies. You didn't start at startups. What do you recommend for students that are interested in entrepreneurship? Do you need domain expertise or not? Is it better to start at a bigger company, then move small? If you start at a small company, how high risk? Is there advice? All of that. What would advice be?
Do you have a day? I'll start with a simple framework, and then I'll let Barry add greater detail and perspective. But I believe there's many paths. And so what I have learned is the best thing to do is figure out where do you want to be in 3 to 5 years. I used to say 5 to 10, and that's like way too long. So where do you want to be in 3 to 5 years? Because you can take a lot of different paths to get somewhere. And once you know where you want to be in 3 to 5 years, I think there's 3 things that really matter in getting there. One is what's the skill set you're developing? And most people focus on that, and that's great. But there's 2 areas that are often neglected. The second is what's your network? And the third is what's your brand? And what I would say is go work in a large company, build some of those entrepreneurial skills, but network with people who are going to help you fulfill your entrepreneurial dreams if that's the right thing that you want to go do. I mean, I'll use a classic example. I grew up in big companies, but I built a network. I was at VMware. If I look at my colleagues at VMware, there's an investing partner at Greylock, at Sequoia, at Andreessen. Like I can go down the list. Like there's other CEOs of startups. So make sure whatever you do, you're focused on where you want to be in a handful of years versus point in time. But don't forget the brand and the network because they can really open up doors of opportunity that you can't get just with skill.
Well said. Barry?
Yeah, on that front, people ask me, so what do you wish you'd taken in business school that you didn't take? And I didn't take the venture capital class, but that's not my answer. Never thought I'd be a venture capitalist. It's making sure you develop the network of your peers, because that is the most valuable thing. And I did, thankfully, and it's become the most valuable thing I took away from the business schools, not the education, but the network. So it does matter. We have lots of CEO, Greg Schott, and lots of people that are in our network that are classmates. That's how I got a job in venture capital.
Good. Very helpful. And let me ask you the first question that came in, which is completely related. How instrumental was your MBA and your undergrad degree in your career pathway? How would you recommend UCLA students spend their time while they're here? And by the way, would you still recommend getting an MBA? Barry?
No. Just to complete the answer on the entrepreneurship question too, if you think you want to be an entrepreneur, go start something, try your hand at it. That's the only way you learn is by doing. You're not going to learn how to be an entrepreneur in a big company or even a little company unless you're doing it. And you got lots of opportunities with the Launchpad, with the accelerator here, with Startup UCLA, lots of opportunities on campus.
Yeah, and I'm going to build on that a little bit because one of the things we talked about when we got together before this is there's different, it's not, there's Amazon and Microsoft and there's the three people in a garage. Like there's a whole spectrum in the middle. And I think when you get to the question of where can you apply what you learned with your MBA and all of that, I actually think a lot of that applicability is in that messy middle. And so for me, I've never been four guy in a garage startup, part because I'm female, but even four people in a garage. Like that's just not my risk profile. That's not where I get my excitement. Like I like working on that next stage. So it's not really big, massive companies, but I like figuring out, we found product market fit from a developer perspective. Now, how do we scale it out to the enterprise? What needs to change? What stays the same? How does the feature set evolve? What relationships do we need? Okay, we've gone from selling one product to now we need to sell a portfolio of products. I'm going from a single variant problem to a multivariant problem. That has cultural implications. That has budget allocation questions. And so to me, the thought I'd put out for you is, if you don't want to start something yourself, don't think you can't be an entrepreneur. There are so many brilliant folks who go out and have great product ideas, technology ideas, but they're going to need help figuring out how to scale an organization, a company, a go-to-market, doing all of that. And I think what you learn in business school, if you're curious and creative, can really bring a lot of value to that stage of growth.
On the question of, and then getting an MBA or not, I do think it's valuable. For me, though, I guess when I was in class, I had these visions that I'd be in a job somewhere writing decision trees, right? And I've never done that. Trying to think of the class stuff I did use. It's not very much, actually. But it did give you a basis for how to think about stuff and a maturity in how you think about stuff. And that's the general piece. It's sort of a tool set. But the network is really critical and the door opening. And for me, it opened the door to Cisco right after they went public. And that became a great job for 6 years. And then it opened a door. A classmate called me in venture capital. I never thought I'd do it. And so those door openings are really what matters. At this stage, no one asked me where I go to business school or cares. I think it matters for your first and second jobs out of business school. But use that door opening wisely and use your network wisely to propel yourself to greater opportunities.
Great. There's quite a few questions, but they're kind of oriented around the current investment environment. So how bad is it right now? How hard is it to raise capital? What other sources of capital do you recommend people think about? All those implications today. Is this a bad time or not?
Well, first off, there's a lot of large companies who are laying folks off. The reality is the cost of money went from zero to costing something. And that fundamentally changes the bar of value you have to be delivering with the money that you have. And that's what's going on. And that's really, really healthy because it's like putting one of my kids in a candy shop with no parameters and just saying, eat everything you want. Hope you don't get sick. So if you look at what's going on right now, first off, there are great companies that are still hiring. So two of the companies I'm on the board of, one is a Lightspeed company, Rubric. They're doing great and they're hiring. Are they slowing hiring down? Yeah, a little bit, but they're still hiring hundreds of jobs. Another company that I did work with in the past, Sneak, they just did layoffs. They just raised $25 million in strategic capital from ServiceNow, and they're going to hire jobs. They're going to hire strategic jobs. So even when companies are laying off, all the companies I work with, they're still going to hire people. They're right-sizing, refocusing investment, trimming their profile. Now, are some companies going to go out of business? Absolutely. And that's great too, because we have too much duplication. We have too many things that were experiments that need to be ended. But that's going to create amazing talent for companies now to get funded that have new ideas and new things to try out. So I think from a work perspective, and I'll let Barry talk about where you raise money, but from a work perspective, I think it's incredibly positive what's going on right now. It may be frustrating given the timing of when you're going to graduate, whether you're going to get an easy job or not. But one of the folks at LinkedIn told me before in tech, you'd get 7 job offers in a month, and now you're going to get 3 job offers over 3 months. You know, there's still jobs out there, and maybe it's not the one you envision taking, but that doesn't mean it's not a great job. And if you look 3 to 5 years out and you build out all those other skills, you're still going to propel yourself in a meaningful way.
Yeah, and add on to that too, the best advice I ever got about finding my first job out of business school was don't pick the function. Don't say I want to be a product manager. Pick the company. Pick a company that you're passionate about what they do and they're growing fast. Because if you're passionate about it, you're going to do well. And if they're growing fast, guess what? Lots of internal opportunities every year to go and be your product manager or be whatever. At Cisco, I was a different role every year because they were growing so fast. So on that, the fundraising environment, despite the doom and gloom in the beginning,
Yes.
we did raise, I think, $150 billion in venture capital, which is the second most ever behind 2021. So there is a lot of venture capital out there. Now, is it flowing freely? No. It's a little tighter, as you might expect in this environment, but you have to separate out the markets. In the early stage market, we're getting back to equilibrium faster. That means the prices have corrected, and now we're seeing deals getting done, seed and Series A deals getting done at lower prices, lower amounts, but they're getting done. In the growth stage markets, less activity because we're still out of equilibrium. Companies raised at higher valuations. They have a lot of money in the bank. They don't have to raise for a while. VCs want to come in, at this price. And until we start to see those markets meet, not going to have as much activity. So that's why it's sort of slow in terms of the growth stage. But stuff is happening early stage. And if you want to raise capital, go out to venture capitalists but target and get a warm intro.
Excellent. So the very final question, just 30 seconds from each of you. One piece of advice, based on everything that you've kind of covered on technology and startups and your MBA and all that stuff, one piece of advice you'd give to everybody here.
Take more risks. Things feel really, really risky in life, and they end up not being that risky. And so for me, I was terrified to leave Accenture to go to VMware. I was terrified to leave VMware to go to New Relic. I was terrified when the board said, oh, we want you to take over from the founder. I've been terrified at every step in my career. But it's turned out great. And the reality is if you work hard and you have a strong network, what's the worst thing that's going to happen? It doesn't work out. You do something else. You learn from the experience, you go on. So if there's one thing I'd say is just take more risk. It's exhilarating, it's fun, and you're going to be fine.
I would say take stock of what you like doing in your job and doing away from, your personal life. Don't let other people tell you what you should like doing. If you like doing this and don't like doing that, write it down. Know what kind of environment you like to be in, what kind of people you like to work with, kind of products you like to work with, how long you like to work in a week, right? How much you like to travel. Know that stuff so that you can find those jobs because you're going to be working for 40 years, right? It better be fun. And the other thing that happens is doors open for you when you least expect it. I never thought I'd be a venture capitalist. A door opened for me 26 years ago. I said, I don't know, isn't that for, old gray-haired guys? So I am now. And I did some research. Like, this is actually stuff I like doing. I like the pace. I like the context switching. I like the variety. I want to try this out. And I did it. And I walked through that door, and I've been in the same job for 26 years. So know what you like and be ready when those doors open.
Yeah.
Because they will.
Yeah.
UCLA graduates, they will open for you.
Yeah, it's good to hear. So listen, a huge thank you to Ivonne and Barry. You covered technology, investing, advice for everybody. What a great session with both of you. A huge thank you. Well done.